Welcome to Bible study. This is the Bible study we're preparing at St. Michael's Lutheran Church in Portland, Oregon for January 12 in 2025. It's the second in a series we're doing on wisdom literature, and we're starting with the book of Psalms. We'll be in Psalms chapter 1 if you want to grab your Bible and get used to that or get open to that. But before we do that, let's start with just a little bit about the nature of wisdom literature and what we can expect as we start to read this. You'll see me standing right here next to the artwork we have in the front of church, and by this big placard right here that says, Christi crux est mihi lux. Latin for the cross of Christ is my light. And that actually is a wisdom statement. That's a statement saying that the cross of Christ guides me, that the cross of Christ is the thing that makes a difference for the decision making in my life. It is the thing that enables me to see the path that I am going to walk on. Wisdom literature, even the wisdom literature written in the Old Testament, is really this. It is the light of Christ's cross being shown upon our lives. Now, of course, they didn't articulate it as cross in the period before Jesus. They used different language for that. But as a Christian, what we really see back written into all of that is that they were always talking about this Jesus and about this cross. But it's a little harder to get to that, or a little more complicated to get to that when we read some of this Old Testament material. Because what they're probably understanding that they're doing at the time is interpreting the Torah. And one of the things we learn from Paul is that the Torah is really all about Jesus. And so they believe themselves to be asking, well, God came to the children of Israel long ago. He rescued them from slavery in Egypt by a strong hand and by his mighty acts of parting the Red Sea and smiting the Egyptians with the plagues, and he brought them out of Egypt and into the promised land. And along the way, he gave them this covenant. You're probably most familiar with its strictures and details in the words of the Ten Commandments. But they really begin with, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt. Wisdom is always embedded in the relationship with God. It's very easy when we start to read wisdom literature to get kind of lost in the weeds of that. On Sunday, when we had our discussion, I used the imagery of a mosaic. A mosaic is one of those images you'll see usually embedded in a wall, which is made up of thousands of little tiles, different colors. Each of them are exquisitely beautiful in and of themselves. They are glass and oftentimes embedded with precious metals, and they shimmer and shine. But their real beauty and their real meaning comes when you take a step back and you see their relationship with each other and how they combine to form a great picture. That's a little bit of what we're facing when we take up the challenge of reading wisdom literature. It is embedded into a much larger picture. And this little saying right here is perhaps the best way to read it. That whatever light it is shedding on the path that I walk on, it is shedding upon that life, upon that path, a light that streams from the cross of Christ. And it is in that graciousness of God, in his rescue of his people of old from Egypt with a mighty hand and his outstretched arm, as a gift to an enslaved, impoverished, rebellious, stubborn people, that he reiterated, or should we say, fully iterated, in the life and the death and the resurrection of his Son, Jesus Christ. All wisdom will flow from that divinely originated action. That's where it starts. We're going to be exploring how wisdom literature shapes and continues to shape our lives. It really is in these initial things we're going to look at Proverbs, we'll look at Ecclesiastes, we'll look at some of the Psalter. We're going to look a little bit at some of the New Testament material too as wisdom literature. We'll even look a little at the Song of Songs. What this is doing is really a commentary on what God has done. Proverbs is probably really understood as the first commentary on the Torah. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt. Live this way. Here's how that takes shape. Here's what that life looks like. Last week, we just looked at the opening verses of this, and we said that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge or of wisdom, and fools despise wisdom and its instruction. The fear of the Lord is all about that relationship. The book of Proverbs is probably best understood as a kind of textbook. We think this was the textbook which was handed to young noblemen who were coming of age in ancient Israel in the city of Jerusalem. It is a collection initially of the wise sayings of King Solomon, to which have then been added in sort of a process of accretion at several junctures later in the book, the wise sayings of other men who were considered wise in later generations. Think of it as updates to your biology textbook. As the science of biology changes, they write a new textbook. Likewise, as history and human experience and the implementation of Torah changed in the life of God's people, they added new chapters to the book of Proverbs. This would go on for hundreds of years. We know that Hezekiah adds a section in here, and he lives several hundred years after King Solomon. Let's start with some of these words of Solomon today. Hear, my son, and this is one of the realities of education in the ancient world. It was almost always sons. Hear, my son, your father's instruction, and forsake not your mother's teaching. For they are a graceful garland for your head and pendants for your neck. My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. If they say, come with us, let us lie in wait for blood. Let us ambush the innocent without reason. Like Sheol, let us swallow them alive, and whole, like those who go down to the pit. We shall find all precious goods. We shall fill our houses with plunder. Throw in your lot among us. We will have one purse. My son, do not walk in the way with them. Hold back your foot from their paths, for their feet run to evil, and they make haste to shed blood. For in vain is a net spread in the sight of any bird. But these men lie in wait for their own blood. They set an ambush for their own lives. Such are the ways of everyone who is greedy for unjust gain. It takes away the life of its possessor. Wow, the people of the ancient world and the people of this world we live in sound very similar, don't they? What Solomon is really exhorting his young charge here to remember is, don't instrumentalize your actions. Don't look at the gain of what it is that is right in front of you. Whether it's the money you are going to steal, the property you are going to dispossess them of unjustly, whether it is the position that you can get by backstabbing them, don't just look at those things in the short-term gain, but rather remember that those things which are gained unjustly will become for you a trap. Now, this theme is going to get unpacked over the next several chapters of the book of Proverbs. But what he's really saying is, live your life with a measure of integrity. And what that's going to mean is, you don't simply take that which is immediately advantageous to yourself. If I gain something unjustly, unrighteously, or as he says here, let us fly in wait for blood, let us ambush the innocent without reason. If we would simply live that kind of me first life, he says, that's going to come back and bite you. That's going to hurt you. That is a foolish way to live. He says, in vain is a net spread in the sight of a bird. You don't just lay your net out and say, while the bird is watching you, the bird's not going to fly into that net. He's going to fly around it. That's not going to work. Likewise, if you would pursue a wise, good life, if you would have the blessing of God, you can't get it this way. It feels like you will. It looks like you'll get the things, the money, the power, the fame, but it won't work. God's kingdom doesn't function that way. Now we have to address a serious question at this point, in that sometimes it really looks like it does. And so we're going to need to talk about what's known as a conventional versus a unconventional wisdom. But for right now, I want to just think about that simple truth that he's getting at here, and that is this instrumentalizing, this commodification of things, and saying there's a return, or there's a risk assessment we're making. Can I get away with this? And what he's really saying is you can't. That in fact there is a justice system which is larger than what is apparent. And that justice system belongs to God. He responds to that sort of enticement of the sinner, the enticement of the foolish, wicked man who is saying, "Come, let us take from the innocent," with a call from wisdom. Wisdom cries aloud in the street. In the market, she raises her voice. At the head of the noisy street, she cries out. At the entrance of the city gate, she speaks. So he's got this personification of the wise person, or of wisdom itself. The word for wisdom in almost all languages, by the way, is that have a gendered language distinction within it. Most languages do. English does not. But in many languages, a word is determined to be either masculine or feminine. Wisdom is almost always feminine. Sophia is the Greek word for wisdom. Wisdom cries aloud in the street, and in the market she raises her voice. At the head of the noisy street she cries out. At the entrance of the city gate she speaks. And what does she say? How long, O simple ones, will you love being simple? How long will scoffers delight in their scoffing and fools hate knowledge? If you turn at my reproof, behold, I will pour out my spirit to you. I will make my words known to you. So wisdom stands there and says, I'm ready to help. How long will you turn away? I'm ready to help. Because I have called and you refuse to listen, have stretched out my hand and no one has heeded. Because you have ignored all my counsel and would have none of my reproof, I will laugh at your calamity. I will mock when terror strikes you. When terror strikes you like a storm and your calamity comes like a whirlwind, when distress and anguish come upon you, you're going to come running. You will call upon me, but I will not answer. They will seek me diligently then, but they will not find me. Because they hated knowledge and did not choose the fear of the Lord. They would have none of my counsel, and they despised all my reproof. Therefore they shall eat the fruit of their way, and they will have their fill of their own devices. For the simple are killed by their turning away, and the complacency of fools destroys them. But whoever listens to me will dwell secure and will be at ease, without the dread of disaster. The first thing that wisdom wants to teach us is, well, there's consequences. That decisions are not simply made and they have no bearing. But in fact, sometimes they have terrible consequences. And wisdom says, I'm not necessarily going to bail you out. I'm not going to make that boo-boo go away. It might be exactly what you need. We're going to end it right there, but I want you, as you come to this class on Sunday, if you're coming, or as you think about this, if you have any questions for me, to think about, well, what does that imply about God's relationship to us? That does God is God really telling us, I'm going to really treat you kind of like an adult here? I'm going to let your decisions fall where they do. I'm going to let you make them, even if that sometimes hurts you. What does that say about the world in which we live? What does that say about his creation and me as a created being? What does this suggest to you and me about the nature of our very life? This first chapter is asking us really to step into a world in which we partake of it through this lens of, was that wise or was that foolish? Is this a good, a righteous, a noble thing to do, or is it base and foolish and wicked? I look forward to talking with you more about this. If you have questions about it, please shoot me an email. God be with you.